comments on my latest Game of Thrones review because I was a lot more talkative about changes from the book to television show, and a lot of people made comments about that. So I wanted to really discuss how I feel about adaptations in a more intellectual and contained way than just being like, oh, I like it when it's like the book. I understand that changes have to be made. I am not stupid. I am not ignorant to the whole transition between book to television to movie and how the mediums are different, how the mediums have to be altered in order to make it work. I understand that. And I do like Game of Thrones as just a television series. I can appreciate it without the books as a bridge between the two. However, I have knowledge of both. And because I know both things, there are going to be things that I will notice. And I'm not a nitpicker because, to be quite honest, I don't have enough of the little details in my mind to nitpick. A Clash of Kings, which is the book that this season of Game of Thrones is based on, I have not read in over a year, so I don't remember enough to be nitpicky about it. And let me be clear, I understand that things have to be cut for the show. I understand that because of time constraints. It's only 10 episodes, which I don't understand why it is, but I know that probably because of budget it has to be 10. It has to be, things have to be cut, details have to be cut, certain things have to be cut. I understand that, and I get that. What I can't stand are needless changes and silly additions. I feel like if you have severe time restraints and severe budget restraints, you don't have to add unnecessary scenes to a show. I think it was in episode 2. It was a discussion between Roz and Littlefinger that went on for about 5 minutes. And it was one of the most pointless scenes I had ever had to watch on that show. It just basically was there to reaffirm what we already know about that character, Littlefinger. And it's kind of like, but we know that. We already had a whole conversation in season 1 with him and Aspire talking about what he does with his prostitutes and how he finds certain women to appeal to certain men, about, how he digs up corpses so that men can have sex with them. We got that already. So why did you need to add that in again? Why do you have to add more to that and add so many additions to storylines that don't need to be there? And the biggest issue I have with some of the changes that are being made is that it's made, in my opinion, purely because these characters are popular, like Dany and Jon Snow. Their storylines have been altered very heavily to expand them. Because Dany, as I recall correctly, didn't have that many chapters in the book that this season is based on. So she doesn't have a huge role to play. But they keep stretching and stretching and stretching out her role and adding all these scenes that don't really complement her character. I feel like these latest episodes, she's come up as very whiny and entitled when that's not how she is at this point in the books. But because they're adding all these scenes to give Emilia Clarke more scenes because she's such a popular character and such one of the standout of the show, they're like, we gotta keep adding stuff in. So for me, it's like when I see the additions with Dany, it's kind of like, these are only here because your character is popular. It's not because it adds anything to your storyline, because it doesn't. At the end of the day, this doesn't add anything to her storyline except bring up stuff that, would come up later on, like her being kind of entitled. Okay, we got hints of that before in season 1, and we're going to have hints of that later in more expanded, more fleshed out story arcs of her character. Why are you dragging this out now when there are other things to focus on that could be focused on in the time that you have? Especially when you have characters who have been downplayed already. And that's my big deal. One of the things that I know I disliked the most when I was doing Harry Potter was how they would cut out details that were important to add meaningless scenes that did nothing but really just, were funny scenes for the lulz or anything like that, but they never add anything to the storyline or added anything to the overall enjoyment of the movie. It was just changes to make one character stand out the most, or to have, everyone likes that character, so let's have a little joke there. I don't like certain characters in the books. I hate Theon Greyjoy, but every scene that he's in right now is important to his character, that I wouldn't cut out anything about his character, even though I despise him with all my heart and soul. He's important. His story is important, so his story has to be there. So I'm like, leave it alone. But when you add all these scenes that you to go even further with Arya and Tywin, those scenes, first of all, let me say, taking out the book's knowledge, they're great scenes because they're brilliantly acted. The whole dynamic of the cat and mouse game is great. And because you have a character like Tywin, who's going to be so prominent throughout the series, it makes sense that you want to bring him in, bring him to the forefront, and make it more interesting. And it brings up more complex natures about who he is and what he does. But after this last one that we've seen, it's like they're not really adding anything. It's more just talking about having them just talk and chat and have like, oh, here's Grandpa Tywin. And one person brought up one good point about how it may be used to reflect their relationship later on. But at the same time, you are changing that and making Arya look even more bad than she already is, which is fine. But then you have a character, like characters like Kat, characters like Sansa, whose characters have been cut out to enforce other people. And it's like, in doing that, you lose out some of the essence of that character. To bring it back to a different movie franchise, in Harry Potter, a lot of roles that Ron played to Harry as their friendship that they played in the books, some of those things were altered and given to Hermione. And it was like, what? Like, why are you, like, we love Hermione and we love Ron, but why are you making Hermione, giving her all these additional roles on top of the ones she already has, and limiting Ron's role? And it was one of the things that, like, when people, we would talk about my friends, like, why did they do that? Like, what was the point? Was Emma Watson just that much more popular that they wanted to just add more stuff to her? Which, I mean, to a degree is fine, but it's just like, but then you have a character who's left as being more of a shell of who he's actually supposed to be. You know, I'm friends and I subscribe to Larry from Otaku Assemble, and one of his big complaints about the character of Sansa is how she doesn't do anything, and that's why he doesn't like her, and he never felt like she was in any real danger. And that's a fault of the adaptational changes of her character. Like, so much of her character and her relationship with other people has been cut out, and you lose that out because it's not like she has been abused constantly throughout this book. And she also has a storyline that I'm not going to talk about here too much because I don't want to have any spoilers, where she's actually engaging and doing something to help her situation out. And because they cut those scenes out, you don't get it about her character. And I heard they're going to push them back and have it in season 3 instead. But at the same time, it's kind of like, so you pushed all that stuff back, but then you brought in all this extra stuff. Like, why did you do that? Why didn't you just spread some more stuff out if that was going to be your whole thing of like, oh, so we'll just have Jon do this thing and build this whole thing where you regret next season instead of stretching it out and making him look ridiculous? Because you realize that in this whole Jon Snow thing that they've been adding on, what has he accomplished in these scenes besides get turned on and get ambushed? That could have been just one scene. One like 7-minute scene. So it's 3 little long ass clips of him doing nothing. And because it just, when his scenes come up, I feel like the entire flow of the show has been shifted. I'm just like, it's like you're just crowbarring him in there because you want him in there, and it makes no sense in the long run of what's going on. And, you know, I don't dislike all the changes. Like I'm saying, I like that they add more complexity to Cersei. I just don't like the fact that they're making her seem overly sympathetic. It's like one of the things that I realize I don't like about movie Snape. Like, I love movie Snape because he's Alan Rickman, and Alan Rickman is great. He can play anything. But at the same time, it's like they totally tone down all the cruel things that Snape does. Almost every cruel thing that he does to the Potter trio is toned down. So it's like in the books you get this guy who, like, you know, he picks on Hermione's teeth, he constantly belittles her. All those things happen constantly, but you don't see that in the movie. So it's like Snape's, he's a dark character and he's kind of an asshole-ish, but he's never brought up to the level of who he was originally. And so you have this character who is, you know, complex, of course, because they give him the complexities in the movie, but you also miss out on the whole other layer of, like, yeah, he's complex and he has this darker side, but he's not inherently this great person, you know? And it's the same thing with Cersei. Like, she has her layers, she has her complexity, but she's not a good person, you know? But they keep trying to make her this more sympathetic person. Like, I get that from a TV standpoint, you want to make her, like, not, you know, bwahaha, but she was never that to begin with. And if you were going to, you know, try to make her more sympathetic and make her, you know, bring that in more, why don't you just use stuff that actually happens? Like, why do you make up stuff? Like, some of it I like because, like, the whole thing with Tywin and Cersei, that's great because you see so much of their relationship and that works. And I think that's important in the long run about their relationship. But other things, I'm just kind of like, you know, I know what you're trying to do, and I understand it, and I like it to a degree, but at the same time, it's like, but you don't need this. But I wonder now that they want to make, Danny more to the forefront because he's popular, and Arya and all those other characters. Like, what are you going to do in A Feast for Crows? I just don't understand the changes that are made because they aren't needed. With the exception of a few things that I think, like, are really good changes that are made, there's some of the time I'm just kind of like, I don't see why, why? I don't understand. And I'm waiting for the season to end so that I can see overall how I feel about how they shifted the entire series, how the changes have all come together to make this one entity. Because I worry sometimes that, like, in changing stuff, they change, like, how the characters are portrayed, the autonomy that they have. Because even though, Kat gets great scenes, she got a great scene last time, and, gets it, but, like, other times, they take away pieces of her character to put her more into a box that is more fit, for the show to watch. And instead of, but while they do that, like, they rip away most of her political savvy, most of her, independent thoughts to make her more of, the den mother, more of the, like, the maternal figure. And while that's a part of her character, obviously, they kind of push it more to the forefront to make it fit that role of she's the wise mother, that's who she is, and that's all that she is, when that's not all that she is. And I guess it just, even though I love the show as a show, I cannot not look at it as an adaptation as well, because that's what it is. It is an adaptation. And it's not like True Blood or Vampire Diaries or Secret Circle, where those shows, to me, they're adaptations, but they're not adaptations. They're reimaginings. They're based on a source material, but the source material doesn't really matter. They just provide the skeletons, and everything else puts the flesh on it. Like, Game of Thrones is, for the most part, like, most of the time, it's loyal to what it's talking about. It doesn't change or add very much. It makes it seem like it's a totally different entity. It is an adaptation of this series. And so I will always view it as that. It doesn't mean I don't like the show as a show. It doesn't mean that I can't appreciate the changes that they make. It means that it is what it is. Even if you like the changes, you'll always question. You'll always keep the two in mind. Like, A Little Princess is my favorite book of all time. Love it. And the 1995 version of the movie is my favorite movie. The movie and the book are totally different. They are so different in so many different ways. Like, Becky's character, they changed Becky's character, they changed the way that the main character is supposed to appear, they changed the setting, they changed the ending, they changed so many things about that book. But why I like it is because at the end of the day, even though they changed the ending and they changed Becky's race and the setting, the soul and the spirit of that book is in that movie, 100%. When I watch A Little Princess, I get the same feeling I get when I read A Little Princess. And that, to me, is important. I don't care if they change things, if at the end of the day, what I'm seeing carries the same soul. And, like, for me, the joy I get as a book reader watching an adaptation or an imagining of the show is seeing the change that they make and seeing how it makes it better. I like when the changes make it better. Like, I love Prisoner of Azkaban. That is my favorite Harry Potter movie. It changes a lot of stuff, but it makes it better. It makes the viewing experience better, but it also doesn't take anything away from the plot, from the story. It connects perfectly with every other book because it still keeps to what's important about the series. And because it's in a series and not a standalone novel, it's even more important because when you cut out stuff that's important later on, it's kind of like you have to backtrack and fix it. And so that's one of the biggest issues I have with, like, sometimes when you, like, oh, it's a bug. There was a bug and it scared me. Sometimes with adaptational changes, you will have things that are cut that have to be backtracked and like a lot of stuff in Harry Potter, like I know there are long lists and there's a lot that you have to cover, but there's so many important details that are taken out, and like those will always bother me because I'm just like, you had a much more well-rounded story already, but you changed it to make stuff, more intense, like all the, like in fucking the hell's Half-Blood Prince, all those Malfoy scenes, just like Jiminy Crickets on toast. Like, I know this happens, but this is dragging on for hours. Like, it was just so bothersome because, it was because, like, everyone likes Tom Felton, he's popular, ladies love him, I loved him, but it's like, I was just like, God, can these scenes end? Like, they're just there for fan fodder until, like, he is conflicted about his actions. Thank you. I could not job of explaining stuff, but also not dumbing it down, and not dumbing down people. But sometimes they do it, and it's not even like with everything. It's with specific characters that I like. I'll admit it. I just don't like how they dumb down Sansa. I don't like how they dumb down Kat sometimes. I don't like how they dumb down Cersei. I'm like, she's a bad person. Just let her be a bad person. I mean, the great thing about Game of Thrones and the universe is that there is no pure good and evil. There's no right or wrong. It is houses and survival. And that comes through in the novels perfectly because they're well written and you have this well written material. You don't need to like make Cersei this bleeding heart person in order to get her side of things. Like, I didn't have sympathetic Cersei, but I totally got her point. I totally could sympathize with her even though I didn't like her. You know, I didn't need to see this Cersei to feel for Cersei. I get it, because the thing is written well enough that I don't need you to like be like, you know, she hurts and Robert was mean to her and he didn't treat her well and she really loved it. Like, I know, it's there already for you to see. You don't need to be like having these whole monologues of just like, explain. That's just me, and I know some of you will disagree, and you feel free to, and tell me that you disagree with me in the comments below, that's fine. But I just want to make sure it's clear to you that I understand things have to be changed. I get that. But I also have my own views about how those changes are made. And it doesn't mean that I don't like the end result or the show. It just means that I will keep in mind changes when I know the original source material. If I didn't read the books, I wouldn't give a shit, obviously. But I did, so it can't be helped. When I watch comic book adaptations, I'm just like, what is this? I remember the first time I watched Spider-Man, the first one, and I like, like, I know Otaku assembled at Larry Zombie about like why you need to put Mary Jane instead of Gwen Stacy, but I just like, it's not even like, I don't want to get into the whole kind of Spider-Man thing, but I'll just say like, my big problem with things with Mary Jane is not even that it's Mary Jane, it's that it's not Mary Jane. That person, not Mary Jane Watson. Sorry. That's just, I wanted to make my point clear. Say bye to girl. Goodbye, girl.